Hey fam, this is like I hate this because this is my third time trying to record this video because I have so many mixed feelings about it and my mind has kept going and going. So I'm just gonna keep it simple. It's not gonna be long. I just started recording. So the topic, right? I just got done watching Natalie's recent video from her channel Contrapoints on canceling. Um, and basically when it's her addressing all of the stuff that she's been involved with, like with Buck Angel and Twitter and all that, right? And I just thought it prudent for me to talk about it, um, considering that I mentioned it in an earlier video of mine. You can go back and see what I said there, and I would advise you to watch her video, right? Because and I'm gonna be drinking from this, because again, no tea in here. Um, But yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings about it, as evidenced by the fact that I can't really give a great articulation of my criticisms, because that's where I've got hung up on the past two times recording the video. Um, I'll start with this. Um, there are things that I like about the video. I appreciate the fact that Natalie apologized for some things. I feel like she could have been a bit more direct with some of them, but yeah, like, I don't know. An apology is an apology. I'm willing to bury the hatchet. She's a good creator and all that. But and one thing I will acknowledge in her video, um, as a problem with cancel culture, is that it's very hard for someone to it's very hard for someone on a platform like social media, like YouTube and Twitter and whatnot, to be criticized in a constructive fashion. And I acknowledge that. Like, she brought up some different um, books and studies and what have you. Um, and like, I see all that, right? Um, for example, um, actually, this is something that my brother brought up previously, right? I recently just got home from Ohio for winter break. And this is actually something that's just sort of coming to me in the moment, so forgive me if I uh, start rambling, but I'm just kind of going with it. Um, when I was home over this break, I was having a talk with my brother, and I may have talked about my brother on here before, but essentially the gist is that I come from a relatively conservative or more centrist or libertarian, what have you, family in the Midwest, right? Very privileged, high standing in society, decent amount of money, and all that, right? They're well off, they're privileged. I mean, like, I am too, right? And I acknowledge that, I say that at the forefront. Um, but yeah, my brother is a cis white guy. He's a freshman in college, and he's like a smart kid, right? He's got a full ride over to Vassar. So super smart kid, on top of his stuff. And so it was actually, and like growing up, I've been a little worried about him because historically he said some like, he's made like sort of Ben Shapiro jokes, and he's said like pseudo all right things, like criticizing like liberals or libtards or whatever have you. The flavor offensive word or whatever of the day. Um, but when I came out, he was very accepting, and so actually I thought that was a very good move for him, um, in his personal growth. And so when I was home over break, there was actually a point where we were able to sit down and have like a decent talk. We were just sitting in the car, we were driving for a while, and when we got back home, before we got there, he had, like eventually the conversation just shifted to more politics and, the stuff that I deal with and all that. And so it was interesting because a lot of his questions sort of went to things that Natalie was talking about, right? Problems primarily having to do with social media at their core, right? Or rather, he didn't ask about social media specifically, but that's generally where the answers to the questions that he asked did come from, right? I'm sorry, that may have sounded weird. Let me explain. So one example was that when he's over at school, he expresses to people that he is more centrist in his political views, right? And a lot of that comes from the fact that he doesn't know much about politics, and I can say that after talking to him. More on that in a second. But his question was more so about why other people reacted in such a negative way that they did, right? Because he said that his major question, or he was wondering why on like social medias and certain people over at his school, he goes to a very liberal school, right? He asked me why people will demonize him effectively for saying that he's centrist, right? And I told him there are basically two parts to that answer, right? One of them is that, like, generally speaking, and this isn't really any news to anyone, but people who are more left on the political spectrum recognize that people who are more or who identify as centrist usually are able to do so because they come from such a position of privilege that they really don't have any reason to engage in politics, right? That it ends up becoming more sports to them than actually important. And because of that, generally speaking, when you identify as centrist and push comes to shove and someone asks for change, or there's a group that's pursuing change in society, people who are centrist tend to skew right, And again, this isn't news for anyone who knows anything about those sorts of politics, but this is basically what I told him, right? That, like, people people don't necessarily dislike you per se, but are highly wary of how you will react when push comes to shove in politics, in national and local politics, right? Especially regarding identity politics, right? And so I expressed that to him, and he understood, right? He got the gist of that, and he was like, all right, I get that. That makes sense. But, and then he went on, right? But there are some people, like, no one has explained that to me in such a way. And people are very quick, instead, to just objectively, like, say I'm a terrible person without giving me any credit or any chance, right? Like, no one, like, people just automatically assume that I'm this horrible person for saying that. And I don't want to be. Like, I want to be a good person, and if I need to learn more, then tell me. But, like, why do people treat me in such a way? And that's where I went and I told him, and this is kind of connecting back to Natalie and what she says in her video about the nature of social media, right? Social media, unfortunately, does not function in such a way where if you say something that is logistically correct on social media, then it is more likely to get more traction, right? That, unfortunately, it's just not the way it works. It's just not. Instead, what gets more traction are things which are more eye-catching, outlandish, outrageous and more filled with emotion, right? To amalgamize to what Natalie was talking about, right? I'm trying to remember the guy who she talks about, Ray Charles. That is him, right? No, it's definitely not Ray Charles or whoever.
Trauma. This is none of my
sorry
fucking business, and it's
Natalie. Enough. Fuck, I can't remember his name. Forgive me, but I'm not recording this again, so we're pushing on. She talks about basically the whole fiasco over the past summer with the makeup guru guy, something Charles, and forgive me, I know that you're looking at me and you're like, Riley, how do you not know what his name is? And it's because I don't know. I don't know. All right, it's the best I can give you. So I'm just going off of what Natalie said in her video, right? So if anything I say is wrong, then understand that's where I'm getting my information from. But effectively what happened was that this guy was accused of being a sexual predator, and that was what got spread around to everyone, right? That was the Twitter headline. That was what everyone was saying, was that this guy is a sexual predator, right? When in actuality, what originally was said in an interview with someone who he was working with, where this whole fiasco sort of started, she had said that he tried to convince some straight men that they were gay, right? And Natalie talks about how that got to the crazier statement pretty at length, so I won't repeat much of that argument. You can just go watch it. She explained it much better than I could. Another aspect that I think goes into the reason why it went from Charles tried to trick some, or allegedly tried to trick some straight men into being gay, how that escalated to this guy as a sexual predator. I think another major reason is just how Twitter functions, right? The allegation that someone tried to trick some straight men into being gay is not nearly as eye-catching or attention-grabbing as this man is a sexual predator, right? Like, it's going to inherently get more retweets, more attention, more commentary. It's just going to get more coverage, right? Some people might say that's why our current president got into office, was because he never actually tweets anything factually correct. He just tweets things that are completely outrageous and gets lots of attention. Other people need to do studies on that. But the point is that I do sort of agree with this idea that Twitter probably is not the greatest platform for criticism as it is mob mentality, right? There is something to be said that Twitter can be a place where people can pile drive onto someone regardless of whether or not it is warranted. And this can have all sorts of negative effects, whether it is pushing my brother towards the alt-right because he feels like he can't even approach the left without being chastised for having certain pre-existing views, even though he's willing to change them provided he's educated, or for demonizing people within a marginalized community, right? So those are the things I agree with, largely, with Natalie's video, right? Like, those are the big takeaway. And there are other, like, generally speaking, it's a decent video. But that's where I'm gonna raise some criticism, is sometimes it can be warranted, and there were some parts of her video, which, I mean, like, there's some things that she just apologized for and moved on, and I was like, all right, you could have spent like a little more time with that and been a little more sincere, but an apology is an apology. I'm not going to, get too bent out over shape, or get too bent out of shape over it. I guess my biggest sort of criticism or concern, or I don't know what to feel about it, is her commentary on how she deals with Buck Angel, right? Because she acknowledges that Buck Angel has said things which can be interpreted as true scum, trans medicalist, what have you, right? Like, she acknowledges that. And she acknowledges that there are things that she could criticize Buck Angel for, but that she chooses not to, because public shaming, in her opinion, having been a victim of public shaming, is never a decent vehicle for achieving justice, right? That's sort of her argument. Again, go fact check. Don't just take my word for it. I'm just a C-rate trans YouTuber, so what do I know? But that just makes me feel a little uneasy, right? Saying that, oh, we should, because I mean, clearly public shaming can be used effectively, right? And if someone says things that, like, if there is a person who is a member of a community and who is a figure in the community who represents themselves to other people, and they say and they have certain opinions, and they maintain to have certain opinions, and they represent that they have those opinions to people who are outside the community, then other people who are outside the community may adopt those and use those against the people inside the community who those opinions may harm. And that's a lot of abstraction to say that, yeah, Buck Angel, who is a trans activist, who says some things which can be construed as trans medicalist, him separating himself from, younger trans people, non-binary people, and what have you, right? And that can have negative effects when someone who is being introduced to the trans community through someone mainstream like Buck Angel is first exposed to these ideas, and that might affect how they think about non-binary people going forward, right? If the one person that they are exposed to first from the trans community has negative views on non-binary people, then they might be like, oh, well, this is a trans person, and clearly if they don't, see these people as valid, or they want to separate from them, then, there must be something wrong with them. And, that might not happen, but it could, right? And that's the danger of being a public figure, right? I'm not sure if that's something that Natalie addresses a lot. She focuses a lot on human aspects, and how being shamed has affected her, right? And I understand that, and I sympathize. And I will say here, right now, do not treat her in such a terrible way, right? Like, she is a person, and she does try, right? And whether or not what this goes to, right, is ultimately how much weight you, as a person who is leftist or in the trans community or what have you, wants to assign her as a public official, right? Because that's what she is, right? Like, ultimately, I think that it's better to look at this more as politics, right? And you, as the viewer, have effectively the same power as a voter, and that you have the power to assign her more power by watching her content and by subscribing to her content, right? And you don't have to give her that. If you disagree with her ideas, then you don't have to watch her or support her or whatever. That doesn't mean that you be mean to her as an individual. She is trying, right? But if her ideas just aren't compatible with your ideology or your understanding of gender or what have you, or if she hasn't, if she hasn't apologized to a satisfactory degree, then just I mean, don't be mean to her. Jesus. We're all trans. I mean, like, if I'm talking to someone who is in the trans community, like, don't pile drive on her. Just understand that her views are different from yours and back off, right? Don't give her your support. Maybe that's where some of the hour, and I understand that's where a lot of her, like, it's a very emotionally charged video, right? In the sense that she feels like she's been hurt by this community that she's tried to help, and she is a bit older, and she acknowledges that, and you know, there's a ton of nitpicking I can do, but she tries her best to be self-aware, and I suppose that the criticism I was addressing, right? I'll get back to that and then I'll wrap this up. I just feel like it's a little soft to say that you can have disagreements within a community, right? Like with Buck Angel, right? She says that, oh, we shouldn't, you know, try to ostracize Buck Angel just because he has one or two negative ideas. When they seem pretty important, right? Like, they seem pretty relevant, especially when he's a trans activist and his ideas may be like, you know, like some of his ideas may explicitly be trying to define certain people out of that community that he represents or claims to, right? Seems like a pretty relevant idea, but I do agree with Natalie that generally speaking, anger is not the correct way to approach it, right? This video is just meant to be part criticism, part praise. Because yeah, I have a lot of mixed videos, or a lot of mixed opinions about a video, and that's why I just had to make this. So I don't know if that was helpful. It's not great that this is one of the videos that I've made lately, where I just sort of made it on the fly. Usually I think about them for like a day or two before starting one. But the takeaway is she apologized, and I'm not sure how much weight to assign it. I'm not sure if she deserves all of the recognition that you gave her before and all the trust that you gave her before, but like, let her live, right? Let her live her life, and you know, don't go out of your way to like ruin it for her. I know I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, right? And especially not someone who has tried their best to be a, you know, a good representative of the community. That I commend her for. And yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Hashtag solidarity. I'm a very nice person, so yeah. Forgive me if this is being a little too soft on her. I'm going to leave it there. You can do what you want with it. I'm going to try and upload another video tomorrow. The video I was planning to upload actually, and I'll probably expand a little more on the subject of social media. But we'll get more to that when I make the next video. So, alright fam, that's all I got. I gotta do some job applications, do some work for, I think I got contracts and Civ Pro on Monday, so that'll be fun. But yeah, I'll talk to you later. Bye.